All right, everybody, welcome. Let's see, let me get you guys some sound here. All right, everybody, you all know that basically the goal is for me to read Dr. Abass Bundu's book. This is day 5 of me reading that book, and I'm going to start from page 83. Okay, so if you've been staying with me, you would know that I've been reading this book. So go back and check all the other lives, so you can keep up with where we're going with these, with the reading of this book of Dr. Abass Bundu. Okay. So, like I said again, it's page 83. But before I even start reading the book, and welcome, by the way, if you've joined me, let's do something together. Let's do something together. Let's do this. I know we've all seen this vehicle of, Marabio, at a time where the country people are basically just starving, right? But this is Marabio. Let's see.
What is now abundantly clear is that the 10 years of APC misrule and economic mismanagement has definitely created considerable suffering for the people of this country. From Kamakwie to Pujehu, from Kono to Freetown, and everywhere, people are suffering under the weight of corruption and the mismanagement of the All People's Congress. I have seen it at first hand, from Falaba to Kenima and from Kailan to Putloko. The people want change. The people are tired of the suffering of paying for a bag of rice at 200,000 from only 60,000 in 2007. The people want democratic change to end their suffering.
All right. And then all of a sudden, you guys see now, my man is cruising around with a Maybach, Mercedes Benz. You see, this is the sad reality. But like I said, this live is not about this, but I just want to share this with you guys. Look at what is actually happening in the country at this particular point in time. People are basically fighting for food.
Now that they rest, I'm not talking about this. I'm like so. When they fight for this credit, let's go. Bo salombo. Before me buy it. Salon. They fight for us.
Guys, you see, this is the reality of what we're dealing with. Imagine people are fighting for food. Starvation is on the rise across that country, and this guy is driving around in a Maybach. It tells you how tone deaf this guy is. It tells you that, of course, he knows he's not the president anymore, so he does not really care. He don't care again about the people of Sierra Leone. It's like you can say what you want to say, whatever you want to do. It's up to you. It's me. I can do whatever I want to do. I'm sure I'm not the president anymore, because with the tripartite committee, by the time the tripartite committee comes out with their findings, of course he's not going to be the president. So he does not care anymore. And then you have the opposition leaders that should take charge and defend and stuff like this, and just take up to the airwaves, take interviews across the country to let folks understand that this is not normal. This should not be happening. Accountability. There's no way this president should be able to afford to buy a vehicle like that. This is the country that we find ourselves with. The people that make less than $1 a day, but the president can afford to ride a Maybach, and they go buy a Maybach. And this is just one of the vehicles that we get now in fleet. You see, so Sierra Leoneans, this is the reality of what we're dealing with. But like I said, my lives right now is only I'm going to read the book of Abass Bundu. But we're in a country at a time like this where we're talking about kush affecting the lives of young people like Rewaya.
Oh, mina zanap sano.
No, something like mama because I'm too feeble.
Okay, mina zanap sano.
Mama.
Oh, zanap sano, mama. Now feeble. So na me born zanap sano.
Look at this.
But why make you the smoke then? Just for smoke.
I nature them.
Yes, people smoke. But your parents don't say they smoke.
Yeah.
Your mama no. Your papa dey.
Papa go down.
Your papa don't die. So now your mama dey. You get small sister.
I'm not the last one.
I'm not the last one. Then why make you the smoke?
You don't know say this cigarette's not fine.
Why make you the smoke? You take kush?
No.
Yes,
Well,
yes,
you didn't give kush.
you just smoke there, man.
You see, at a time when, look at our society. Look at what is actually happening. But this man is driving around in a Maybach. You see, motocar will not be able to afford when it was, just uselessly going around. All of a sudden now, and get opportunity 2018 to 2023 for him to become a president. This is what he's driving around in Maybach, and our people are suffering. Our people are suffering. The drugs epidemic, the kush wahala. Look at this. This is at the SLP party office. Actually, they're sharing. At the SLP party office, the office of the former president. He's driving around in Maybach. It's the sad reality of what we're doing with that. It's the sad reality. The things that they couldn't afford when they were in the diaspora. It's not what they're chasing after. So some matter of it right now, they put up in London. In London, most of them see it creeping away. There is a president today. So he does not care. He knows he's done. He doesn't care. He knows he's done. Like Christian shops, yes, they're actually sharing Christian, yes, but like I said, my life is all about just continue to read the book of Dr. Abass Bundu. I'm going to switch to that. And I'm not going to be able to do much today. It's almost 7 o'clock now. So, but let's get to the reading of Dr. Abass Bundu's book. If you go back to my last session, I actually stopped at page 83, and I'm just going to start from here, okay? I'm just going to read from here, guys, so we can get things going here. That's what I want to do. And thank you again for joining me, guys. Thank you for joining me. All right? Okay. So page 83, let's take it from here. The Nigerian military may be forgiven if at the beginning it was not too familiar with the ethnic bias of the Kamajo militia when it decided to harm them. Its main motive then was that it needed an ally and it did not much care where it came from. However, it learned its lessons fast. By January 1998, it had itself become skeptical about the true motives of its erstwhile ally. So basically, this is how the Nigerian troops were, in 1998, they were very disappointed that they actually gave, arms and ammunition to the Kamajors because they actually, armed the Kamajors, which it was a very bad decision, and they regretted all of that stuff later on, right? So that is what we're dealing with here. But anyway, so yeah, let's continue. First, it accused them of being more interested in mining diamonds for self-enrichment. By the way, I've read all of this. I'm just warming up from here to take it all the way through. This was from the last live where I stopped. I'm just warming up to go past this point now. First, it accused them of being more interested in mining diamonds for self-enrichment. Let me help my eyes here, man. All right. Cool. Okay. So, like I said again, first, it accused them of being more interested in mining diamonds for self-enrichment than in fighting the rebels. Secondly, to the discomfiture of the government, the Kamajors all too frequently put themselves beyond the pale of military discipline, forcing the Nigerians to express misgivings about their suitability for the new national army. They preferred instead the disbanded soldiers whom they described as better trained, more experienced, and already battle-tested. The failure of the Kamajors' leadership to arm twist the Nigerians often led to skirmishes between them. All right, so this is why I was officially starting today to read, right? So Nigeria's unilateral embargo on Sierra Leone. This was where I'm going to continue now. All right, so before the coup, Sierra Leone had already been placed at the very bottom of the United Nations list of poor countries in the whole world. Imagine this was 1998. Sierra Leone was still at the bottom. And till this day, we are still at the bottom. That's what this is actually saying. Nothing has changed. Every time we try to make progress, I mean, these guys just come and totally just put us a step back, just take us back all the way. So let's see. All right. So before the coup, Sierra Leone had already been placed at the very bottom of the United Nations list of poor countries in the whole world. There were also warnings of an impending food crisis that was growing worse by the day. We're dealing with food crisis up until now. Matter of fact, the people are more hungrier today than they were a few years ago. 2020 or 2021, the World Food Program actually came out and said Sierra Leoneans were prone to hunger and starvation, especially in the provinces. And we know that at this particular point, nothing has changed either. Our people are suffering whilst the president is driving around in a Maybach. You all know what I'm talking about. All right? Well, let's continue reading. The food deficit forecast was put at more than 80,000 tons, which could only be met by food aid. By the beginning of July 1997, food prices had soared on account of shortages, and starvation was gripping various parts of the country. Red Cross officials recorded 15 deaths by starvation in the townships of Mapaki and Mobonto in the north, 68 in 4 chiefdoms of Moyamba district in the south, whilst residents of Bo were reported to have resorted to eating sapling stems. It was not different in the health sector, whose alarm signals were becoming very audible. ICRC, that the International Red Cross, described the situation as rapidly deteriorating. All right. So ICRC described the situation as rapidly deteriorating and likely to grow worse with the onset of the rainy season at that time, right? Already, there had been sharp increases in the number of cases of malaria, Lassa fever, dysentery, and respiratory infections. The people cannot afford any more to buy medicine because there is only little cash flow in the country, with banks closed, and on the other side, the stock of medicine available in the country is getting scarce. So, we have started to operate different clinics and health centers in Freetown. The ICRC delegate had warned. Similarly, the health authorities in McKinney reported that in just 2 days, more than 320 children had died in the northern province alone from cholera and typhoid fever, and that hundreds more were in a critical condition. Thus, by mid-July 1997, Sierra Leone was already trapped not only by war, also by famine and disease, which were growing at a most alarming rate. The signals were all too evident that the situation could spiral out of control. Notwithstanding, the Nigerian Intervention Force did not hesitate to impose a unilateral blockade on the country. The precise date when this blockade started is unclear, but by July 12, just days before the first diplomatic engagement between ECOWAS and the AFRC junta, it was said to be already in force. Let me read that again from the top. The precise date when this blockade started is unclear, but by July 12, just days before the first diplomatic engagement between ECOWAS and the AFRC junta, it was said to be already in force. Apart from air and sea, the blockade was extended to the highway, linking Freetown with the rest of the country, preventing even local foodstuff and produce from entering the city. In a rare demonstration of remorse for the widespread suffering that this blockade caused, Colonel Maxwell Kobe, Nigerian Task Force Commander in Sierra Leone, ordered the opening of the Orogu Bridge at Joe, just outside Freetown. His was just before the peace talks between ECOWAS and the AFRC junta at Abidjan in July 1997. However, he warned that if the talks fail and ECOMOG is giving the mandate by ECOWAS to forcefully remove the coup makers from power, ECOMOG will invade Freetown and bomb the city to remove them. On July 31, following the collapse of the talks in Abidjan, Tom Ekimi, Nigeria's foreign minister, gave notice of toughening the blockade. We will do nothing that will hurt the ordinary citizens of Sierra Leone. But products like petroleum products, food and arms and ammunition will be restricted completely. Turning food into a weapon of war, he added, the effect of an embargo on food on the civilian population is unfortunate, but those who seize power in Sierra Leone have to be taught a lesson. This was the Nigerian foreign minister at the time. On August 4th, also came the announcement that the Nigerian leader had ordered a full-scale embargo on Sierra Leone. Before that, he had merely one business interest in Sierra Leone to withdraw, adding that with the successful conclusion of the Liberian peace process, his junta now had plenty of time to devote to the crisis in Sierra Leone. Following this presidential decree, the Nigerian commander on August 6 warned all states to observe its country's economic blockade against the junta in Sierra Leone, and international shipping and airlines to keep out of Sierra Leone's territorial waters and airspace. Any action in contravention of this warning, the statement went on, is at the peril of the ship or aircraft concerned. ECOMOG reserves the right to mete out appropriate reprisals if this warning is violated. All this shows how much power the Nigerian forces had arrogated to themselves. Power that Resolution 1132, 1997 of the Security Council did not give them. That resolution had merely authorized ECOWAS, in conformity with applicable international standards, to halt inward-bound maritime shipping in order to inspect and verify their cargoes and destinations. It certainly did not authorize the random bombing of maritime shipping. Man, I mean, some of us remember. Sorry, guys, it's been a long day. I'm tired, but gotta do what we gotta do. Okay. So it is impossible to assume that this misapplication of the United Nations embargo by the Nigerians was merely the result of ignorance. On the contrary, a statement by ECOMOG headquarters on December 10, 1997, reveals just how much they knew that they were doing. A Chinese tanker, the Haegun U-301, with a crew of 17 persons, had been intercepted and arrested. The ship, which had been accused of violating the United Nations embargo by attempting to supply fuel to fishing trawlers within Sierra Leone's territorial waters, was escorted to the port of Monrovia for interrogation and search. This clearly shows that the Nigerians were well aware of the limitations on their power and that they were capable of enforcing the embargo correctly if they wanted to. All right, so that was the end of chapter 2. Now let's begin chapter 3. All right, the role of ECOWAS. The OAU mandates to ECOWAS. So OAU at the time, gave a mandate to ECOWAS. Let's see what it said. The coup in Sierra Leone coincided with the holding of the OAU's annual summit in Harare, Zimbabwe. Nigeria was represented there in full force, augmented by the delegation from the exiled government of President Kaba, which was allowed to take Sierra Leone's seat. The case these two delegations presented went unchallenged as they campaigned vigorously for the use of force. Kofi Annan backed them. A strongly exhorted African. Actually, let me take it from the top on this one. The case these two delegations presented went unchallenged as they campaigned vigorously for the use of force. Kofi Annan backed them. It strongly exhorted African leaders not to accept, as fate accompli, coups which topple elected governments, sometimes for sectional interest and sometimes simply for their own. Nonetheless, the OAU did not sanction the application of force in Sierra Leone. So the OAU was with the whole thing. Nor was the mood outside of the OAU favorable to military intervention, especially one led by General Abacha's military junta. So OAU was kind of like in between, right? They were not sure what they were doing either. So they didn't support force, but at the same time, they didn't, totally say no to it. Nor was the mood outside of the OAU favorable to military interventions, especially one led by General Abacha's military junta. Because again, a junta was trying to impose, force on another junta. The United States, for example, while deploring the coup for overturning an elected government, did not conceal its opposition to the use of force. Nicholas Burns, State Department spokesman, stated, "We have not taken a position of direct support for the Nigerians, but we do not support the objective that the rebels cannot win. I was just hearing some sound on my phone here. In opposition to the use of force, Nicholas Burns, State Department spokesman, stated, "We have not taken a position of direct support for the Nigerians, but we do support the objective that the rebels cannot win. They cannot succeed in overturning a democratically elected government and installing in its place a bunch of military officers who do not know how to run a country." Britain's position was similar. Baroness Simmons, Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State in the FCO, even after the sacking of the junta, stated, "Her Majesty's government welcomed the fact that the rule of the military junta in Freetown has been brought to an end, but we do not endorse the ECOMOG action. It was important that in all these circumstances, regional organizations act within their mandate from the Security Council." A counterpart in the House of Commons, Tony Lloyd, Minister of State in the FCO, buttressed this when he said that while we welcome the fact that the rule of the military junta, had been brought to an end, we were unable wholeheartedly to endorse the ECOMOG action. We believe that any use of force should be based on international law. On June 4, the OAU adopted a resolution on Sierra Leone. It condemned the coup and called for the immediate restoration of constitutional order. It also called on all African countries and the rest of the international community to withhold recognition from the junta, and especially appealed to the leaders of ECOWAS to assist the people of Sierra Leone to restore constitutional order to their country. The OAU also underlined the imperative need to implement the Abidjan Peace Agreement, which it said continued to serve as a viable framework for peace, stability, and reconciliation in Sierra Leone. This decision this decision without precedent. The OAU had never fashioned out any rules for judging the legality or otherwise of regimes in Africa which come into existence unconstitutionally. The key question, therefore, is on what principle was the OAU decision based? Can it stand in the face of the exclusionary principle of non-intervention in international affairs embodied in Article 3, subsection 2 of its charter? These questions are all the more important when viewed against the failure of the organization to act in a parallel situation in Congo, Brazzaville, in October 1997. The constitutional government of President Pascal Lissouba had been violently overthrown by his adversary, former President Denis Sassou Nguesso, backed by foreign forces from neighboring countries. There could be no clearer case for OAU condemnation. Like Sierra Leone, an elected constitutional government was overthrown by violent means, resulting in a massive outflow of refugees. Yet the OAU did not condemn it. Even worse than Sierra Leone, the overthrow was carried out with the help of foreign forces, contrary to the charter of the OAU. Still, there was no condemnation. Be that as it may, there was acknowledgement by the OAU that the responsibility for returning Sierra Leone to constitutional order was first and foremost one of the people of Sierra Leone, one for the people of Sierra Leone. Secondly, that in performing this duty, they were entitled to seek assistance from OAU and the wider international community. Put another way, the OAU was laying down the substratum on which any solution to the crisis must be based, namely the will of the people of Sierra Leone. Any such solution must have three elements: genuine popular support, consistency with the goals of the OAU and the UN, and effectiveness. Three-pronged strategy: negotiation, sanctions, embargo, and force. It was envisaged that all three measures may be applied simultaneously in order to achieve three objectives. A, to reinstate the legitimate government of President Kaba. B, to return the country to peace and security. And C, to stem the flow of refugees and displaced persons. On the question of the use of force, the ministers introduced a caveat that no such action should be taken until there had been further consultation at the highest level. It then set up a committee of 4, later enlarged to 5, then to 7, and charged it with responsibility for monitoring developments in Sierra Leone and ensuring the implementation of decisions resulting from the recommendations. It was also asked to open dialogue with the AFRC and report back to the ECOWAS chairman within 2 weeks. But the strategy was not well focused. It beats the imagination how it was possible to combine all 3 measures at one and the same time. History is replete with instances where dialogue has been pursued pari passu with sanctions or the threat of force, but never with the actual use of force. The two are simply incompatible. The foreign ministers probably had this problem in mind when they insisted on the caveat. Not also far from their thinking was the fact that the crisis was a purely internal one, and in accordance with the provisions of the Protocol on Mutual Assistance in Defense 1981, harmed intervention by the community in such situations is barred. On what authority, then, did the foreign ministers contemplate the use of force? Was this their understanding of the OAU's mandate to ECOWAS to assist the people of Sierra Leone to restore constitutional order? If so, all that can be reasonably said is that it was a most extraordinary interpretation, because the OAU itself did not even pretend to have such authority. Nemo dat quod non habet. In absence, of course, that's Latin there. In absence of any such authority did not apparently deter Chief Tom Ekimi, Nigeria's foreign minister. On July 11, he claimed before the United Nations Security Council that the OAU had endorsed the action taken by ECOWAS on June 2 to reverse the situation in Freetown. And he tried to forge an explanation for the use of force in these terms. In the course of the deliberations, concern was expressed by delegations about the use of force as a means of resolving the present crisis in Sierra Leone. However, was recognized that the other 2 options, including negotiations and sanctions blockade, could not be achieved without the use of military force. For example, if ECOWAS would mount a credible sanctions regime against the illegal authorities in Sierra Leone, the air, land, and sea borders of Sierra Leone would have to be militarily blocked, while negotiations would be enhanced by a show of force and a sustained military buildup in the area. The foreign ministers therefore recommended that all 3 measures would require consultations at the highest level among ECOWAS countries. They have therefore suggested, thank you, Wuri, by the way, I just saw your comment here. They have therefore suggested that the ECOWAS chairman should initiate these consultations. This was a non sequitur par excellence. Most of his colleagues disagreed, nor did his interpretation sit well with the understanding of his own boss, who, while on a visit to Abidjan on August 18th, admitted that force could only be used as a last resort. The dialogue is still open, Abacha said, but if the leadership in Sierra Leone is not reasonable, will not look at things objectively, then we will look at so many other options like the issue of sanctions, the issue of embargo, and where necessary force can be used. Another problem with the foreign minister's recommendations was that they did not consult the people of Sierra Leone either before or after their deliberations. The visits undertaken by individual ministerial delegations from Ghana and Guinea were outside the aegis of ECOWAS, nor did the ministers seem troubled by the fundamental principle of odi alteram partem. Guys, you'd have to look all these words up, okay? These Latin, jargons. They had apparently reached, let me repeat that again, the Latin jargon. Audi alteram partem. They had apparently reached their conclusions relying solely on evidence tendered by the representatives of Kaba's exiled government in Conakry. By any standards, this falls short of their mandate, and by contemplating the use of force, they clearly exceeded it. The underlying assumption throughout was that President Kaba's government was a democratically elected government, and that alone justified any measures ECOWAS and its members might wish to take to oust the illegal military regime in Freetown. To say the least, this argument was threadbare and brazen and could only lead, as indeed it did, to a long drawn-out conflict. The Alliance for Peace and Democracy had cautioned against this on August 25th. It said that the use of force could produce unintended repercussions on the war-weary civilian population and on the already ravaged economy, especially its infrastructure, and indeed on the intervention force itself, which would almost inevitably become embroiled in a long-lasting urban-type guerrilla war. The end result would be to make worse an already bad situation and postpone indefinitely the prospects of achieving a durable peace. The alliance went on to advise that what is needed now is the adoption of a peace plan that would contribute to the consolidation of peace and the restoration of constitutional order. Such a plan should bring to center stage, as acknowledged by the OAU itself, the Abidjan Peace Agreement of November 30th, 1996, and should call on all concerned to update the agreement and renew their efforts to implement its terms to the fullest, while also recognizing the new realities on the ground. Of course, this cannot be achieved without the release and participation of the leader of the RUF, Corporal Furisanko. Consisting of concerned Sierra Leoneans in London, the alliance was not alone in this. The International Crisis Group, ICG, made a similar warning. The effort to return the country to democracy will at worst fail and at best provide very short-lived results as long as it is pinned exclusively to the return of the previous government intact. Demobilization and critical reintegration of all armed elements is a prerequisite to both sustainable security and sustainable democracy, and ensuring Sierra Leone has a government that tackles these issues should, for now, be the strategic goal of international policy. Neither Kaba nor Abacha paid heed. They continued to pressurize the international community into ratifying their military campaign in Sierra Leone, regardless of the consequences. Any proposal, therefore, that fell short of this was considered by them to be an anathema. The United Nations Security Council reacted to the ECOWAS recommendations. It gave its full support to the objectives but not the strategy, particularly the use of force. Instead, it called on the coup leaders to cooperate with ECOWAS and agreed to continue its monitoring of the progress of measures aimed at the peaceful resolution of the crisis. As I wanted to add the book right here, so you guys know it's Abass Bundu's book. Good, the book is there now. All right. It also promised to consider other appropriate measures if the junta failed to restore. Let me take it from the top here. Sorry. The progress of measures aimed at. No. Instead, I'm going to take it from instead. It called on the coup leaders to cooperate with ECOWAS and agreed to continue its monitoring of the progress of measures aimed at a peaceful resolution of the crisis. It also promised to consider other appropriate measures if the junta failed to restore constitutional order. Obviously, This was not what Abacha and Kaba had hoped for. Ikimi put on a brave face. Ikimi, by the way, is the foreign minister of Nigeria's foreign minister at the time. So Ikimi put on a brave face when he expressed satisfaction that all the elements that we would want are contained in the type national conference consisting of representatives of the key stakeholders, political parties, and civil society. The fundamental principles implicit in these proposals were the recognition that, first and foremost, however passionate the concern of friends might be, it was the duty of the citizens of Sierra Leone themselves to take full ownership of their tragedy and its solution. Secondly, that a solution arrived at in this way stood a better chance of commanding the support and respect of all the stakeholders and of strengthening the foundations of lasting peace and national reconciliation. As it happened, the junta leader himself had given a similar assurance to the visiting Ghanaian ministerial delegation a month earlier that they would demit power after 6 months. He had said that amount of time was needed to complete the process of disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration of ex-combatants into civil society, which they had already begun. However, as became evident at the second Abidjan meeting, these proposals had not found favor with the AFRC, although they tried to justify their attitude as purely one of tactic. The meeting aborted following the unexpected announcement by the junta leader. The AFRC delegation returned to Freetown empty-handed and without its leader. In the hope of winning back his foreign secretary and appeasing ECOWAS, the junta leader wrote to him on July 31. He acknowledged that his broadcast the previous day had not gone down well with a number of enlightened citizens and conceded that he had overreacted, and for this I am sorry. As human beings, we all make mistakes, and I am no exception. Of course, this is Johnny Paul, right? I am willing further to admit this much, that I erred in making such a broadcast at the time the negotiations were in progress in Abidjan, and the impression might have been created that our delegation was not acting in good faith throughout. To that extent, the distinguished foreign ministers were right in coming to the conclusions they arrived at without the benefit of our assessment of the situation from a distance. In hindsight, however, I now realize that I may have put my Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, Mr. Alimami Paulo Bangura, as leader of a delegation in an enviable position, as he was neither fully briefed nor was he aware of the contents of the said broadcast of yesterday, the 30th of July, 1997. I know, guys, let me read this side again so you guys don't think it's Paolo Conte. It says Mr. Alimami Paulo Bangura. Okay? Just so you know, I just want to clarify that properly. Mr. Alimami Paulo Bangura, as leader of our delegation, in an enviable position, as he was neither fully briefed nor was he aware of the contents of the said broadcast of yesterday, the 30th of July, 1997. Reacting to the breakdown of the talks, the Security Council convened on August 6th and issued a presidential statement in which it pinned responsibility for the failure entirely on the junta. It condemned as unacceptable the junta's attempt to set preconditions for the restoration of the house-state government and demanded that it resume negotiations with ECOWAS immediately. It again declared its readiness to take appropriate measures with the objective of restoring the democratically elected government of President Kaba if the junta failed to make a satisfactory response. All right. Now, the Conakry meeting of October 22 and 23. The next meeting of the ECOWAS committee, this time enlarged to 5 members, following the inclusion of Liberia, with the AFRC took place in Conakry on October 22 and 23. Again, let me take it from the top. The next meeting of the ECOWAS committee, this time enlarged to 5 members, following the inclusion of Liberia, with the AFRC took place in Conakry on October 22nd and 23. The real purpose of this meeting so far as Nigeria was concerned, seemed to be to unlock the doors to the Commonwealth Biennial Summit in Edinburgh, which had been closed to its delegation. In the months leading to the summit, agitation had mounted for the expulsion of Nigeria from the Commonwealth. In reply, Nigerian jet fighters had bombarded residential suburbs in eastern Freetown, thereby shattering the lull in the fighting and provoking the junta into renewed hostilities. This bombing continued into October. This bombing continued into October and was only momentarily halted when an ECOWAS peace plan was announced in Conakry on October 23. No sooner it became apparent that this had failed to impress the Commonwealth Summit than the accord was thrown to the wind and the Nigerian army in Sierra Leone once again resumed business as usual. In language that smacked of sarcasm, the Commonwealth exhorted the Nigerian military junta to try and match its support for democracy in Sierra Leone with compliance at home with the Harare principles. Like the Abidjan Peace Accord before it, the main burden of the Conakry peace plan was the re-establishment of lasting peace through dialogue and reconciliation, to be followed by the reinstatement of the constitutional government within a 6-month time frame. There was mutual recognition by the AFRC of the need to make way for the reinstatement of Kaba's government on the one hand, and on the other, by the ECOWAS and Kaba's government of the continuation of the AFRC as a government for a further 6 months. The peace plan also contained political and military provisions as well as a humanitarian program to accommodate this new arrangement. On the military front, the parties agreed on an immediate ceasefire to be monitored by ECOMOG and verified by UN military observers. In addition, a process of disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration of ex-combatants was to be put in place starting from December 1997. Again, under ECOMOG supervision, and incentives were to be provided through international financial assistance to facilitate the process. On the political front, the parties agreed on the need to restore constitutional order after creating the appropriate climate for the Nigerian to regain effective control of the country. As a prerequisite, however, the parties agreed to evolve an all-inclusive government, which would accommodate the interests of the various parties in Sierra Leone. Accordingly, the new cabinet was to be a cabinet of inclusion. Appointments to boards of parastatals and senior cadre of the civil service were to reflect the broad national character, and that these power-sharing formula was to come into effect not later than April 22, 1998. It was believed that these measures would enjoy the support of the majority of Sierra Leoneans, as well as the confidence of the sub-region. The parties further agreed to allow Fodisanko to play an active role and participate in the peace process, and that in the spirit of both the Abidjan and Conakry Accords, he would be allowed to return to his country to make his contribution to the peace process. At the time Sanko was in detention in Nigeria. Finally, it was agreed to extend unconditional immunities and guarantees from prosecution to all those involved in the unfortunate events of May 25, 1997, to take effect as from April 22, 1998. The Conakry Peace Plan was hailed as a significant breakthrough, partly because its tenor was pragmatic and conciliatory, but mainly because it attempted to redesign the political architecture in order to put the country back firmly on the road to genuine national reconciliation. It also recognized special responsibilities for the people of Sierra Leone to be assisted by ECOWAS and the United Nations. Giving this strikingly innovative approach to the resolution of the conflict, The Alliance for Peace and Democracy in Sierra Leone welcomed it. The alliance advanced a view that it was necessary, first and foremost, for the parties to accord primacy to the political arrangement within the framework of the National Conference. As experience elsewhere had shown, both the deployment of ECOMOG and the disarmament process could have been considerably strengthened if the management of the political aspects of the plan were both efficient and effective. However, to the utter disappointment of the people, the peace plan was never put into effect. That was a great peace plan, never put into effect. C. Further meetings of the ECOWAS Committee of Five. As envisioned by the Conakry Peace Plan, the Committee of Five was due to undertake an assessment mission to Sierra Leone on November 20, 1997. It never took place. Instead, from November 11 to 12, these dates now that these dates are coming up, actually, these were the dates that actually are set to GCE. Because I think the first, what month was that? But the first attack, I remember we were taking, because I actually sat my GCE at grammar school when the jets came. It was the jets that actually dispersed us. So everybody scattered with the jets and can fly over. And then we repeated GCE in November that same year, 1997. So, those were turbulent times, man. Those were really turbulent times. That is why I'm reading this book, because I want, Sierra Leoneans, let us see where we've come from so we can see where we're going. You see, history is very important. That is why I'm reading this book of Dr. Abass Bundu. And again, to shame Dr. Abass Bundu, because he knows everything that has happened and he's part of this foolish and useless nonsense that has gone on for the past 5 years. But he knows everything that happened. He wrote about it and then he became part of it too. How terrible can one be? But let's continue. As envisioned by the Conakry Peace Plan, the Committee of Five was due to undertake an assessment mission to Sierra Leone on November 20, 1987. It never took place. Instead, from November 11 to 12, the ECOMOG field commander held technical meetings with representatives of the AFRC at Kosso Town on the outskirts of Freetown to discuss modalities for the implementation of the peace plan. Another meeting followed in Freetown on November 27th, this time with both the ECOWAS Executive Secretary, who is Abass Bundu, and the UN Special Representative for Sierra Leone present. Throngs of war-weary citizens waving banners demanding peace had greeted them. The technical discussions ranged over 17 items, including the choice of venue, who was to be disarmed, who was to do the disarming, the timing of the release of the RAF leader from detention in Nigeria, the demining of the international airport and other locations, the reopening of the air and seaports, and the recommencement of humanitarian assistance. Provisional agreement was reached on the recommencement of humanitarian assistance set for November 14. The immediate reopening of the seaports and airports, the exchange of prisoners of war through the ICRC and the Catholic Mission, the demining of the airport, and the dismantling of unnecessary roadblocks. There was also agreement to set up 3 committees to deal with disarmament, ceasefire violations, and humanitarian assistance. However, 3 major issues were unresolved. First, who was to be disarmed? The junta had stoutly argued that the national what am I missing here? Hold on, guys. Let me see something. Oh, shucks. Guys, hold on 1 second. Hold on 1 second here, guys. Hold on 1 second. I'll be right back, eh? Let me give you guys this.
The 10 years of APC misrule and economic mismanagement has definitely created considerable suffering for the people of this country. From Kamakuye to Pujem, from Kono to Freetown, and everywhere, people are suffering under the weight of corruption and the mismanagement of the All People's Congress. I have seen it at first hand, from Falaba to Kedima and from Thailand to Putloko. The people want change. The people are tired of the suffering of paying for a bag of rice at 200,000 from only 60,000 in 2007. The people want democratic change to end their suffering.
But now that they rest, una dey fight for this case. The rest goes. But Salombo, Salon. They dey fight for us, so no stone, I beg. Make the woman get the rest, make the woman they take the rest. Get the rest, make the woman they take the rest. Salon, na for rest and the fete so papa God. Get the woman the rest. You know they cook, let the woman when they cook, may take the rest.
So before people they smoke, Zainab Sano.
Oh, me Zainab Sano.
No, something like mama because I'm too bad.
Okay, me Zainab Sano.
Mama.
Oh, Zainab Sano, mama. Now fiba. So na me born Zainab Sano. Not bad. But why make you the smoke then?
All right, guys, I'm back. So what has happened is this, guys. I'm going to have to switch. Let me do this here real quick. So, guys, I would have to read. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. And by the way, yes, Wuri, I owe you a call, my brother. I'm gonna call you. I'm gonna call you, okay? Just so you know. I just saw the complete text that you sent here. I owe you a call for sure. I'm gonna call you on that. I'm gonna call you. But yes, guys, I have to continue to read this. From the National. Let's see here, guys. Bear with me. I wanna read this for you on the screen so you guys can see it. There was a cutoff here, which kind of affected stuff. Aha. Okay. So guys, this is a little crazy here, but you guys are not gonna see it. It's gonna be hard. But okay. All right. This is what I'll do. Okay. This is what I'll do. I'm missing a few pages here. I was gonna put the pages on camera that I'm reading, but let me do this. I'm just gonna read it. I'm just gonna read it, okay? I'm just gonna read it right here. So we are right at argued that the National Army, being the legally constituted army, should be exempted from disarmament. All right, guys, I'm just gonna read it from here this way. All right, sorry about that. I'll try to scan the rest of the pages in I didn't scan the rest of the pages in, so I'm going to read this. And then I'll take it from there. All right. Okay, okay. I'm gonna give you guys this screen here. So again, from the national, from the national army, being the legally constituted army, should be exempted from disarmament. The Nigerians disagreed. Later, they insisted. Matter of fact, let me take note of this time. At 6 minutes. Okay, there was a pause there. I just want to take note of this time, so I'll re-edit this whole part so I don't show all this other stuff that I showed that's not necessary. Okay, so I know where I'm at. Okay, the Nigerians disagreed. Later, they insisted that an understanding had been reached at Conakry that disarmament should disarmament should apply to all combatants without exception, but there was no independent confirmation of this. It is interesting, however, that the Nigerians did admit to agreeing to joint security patrols for certain strategic sites, which clearly suggests that the parties did indeed envisage that a part of the National Army would continue to operate normally and play a role alongside the Nigerian troops during the 6 months transitional period. It is well to remember also that the Abidjan Accord of 1996 had simply referred to the restructuring and reorientation of the military as well as its leadership and to the downsizing of the armed forces of Sierra Leone, taking into account the security needs of the country. Articles 9 and 10, which were in Articles 9 and 10, where it talked about disarming, the reference was only to private militias like the RAF, the Kamajors, and civil defense forces. In the case of the RAF, it was agreed that it could convert itself into a political movement provided it had disarmed. This was Article 13 of the agreement. The second point of disagreement concerned All right. So the second point of disagreement concerned Nigeria's domination of the sub-regional forces in Sierra Leone. The AFRC contended that while they were not opposed to Nigerian troops per se, nevertheless, they were opposed to their dominating the peace process. They therefore called for a reconfiguration of the sub-regional forces with Nigerian involvement, but not Nigerian domination. This was reminiscent of the powerful argument that Charles Taylor of Liberia had advanced at the ECOWAS negotiations at Yamoussoukro in 1992, to the effect that his forces could not reasonably be expected to disarm to an army against whom they had been fighting almost regularly. To insist on that, he had further argued, was tantamount to inviting them to surrender. ECOWAS had accommodated these arguments by reconfiguring ECOMOG through the introduction of new troops, which hitherto had not participated in ECOMOG, initially from other ECOWAS countries and subsequently from Uganda and Tanzania. The third point of disagreement concerned the modality and timing of the release of the RUF leader. The RUF fighters insisted that unless their leader was released from detention in Nigeria and allowed to play a part in the peace process, they would not agree. They would not agree to disarm. They also warned that if President Kaba were returned to power by force, it would only lead to a prolongation of the conflict as their forces, along with many others, would flee into the bush once more to continue their rebellion interminably. While the stalemate persisted, the junta leader protested in a BBC interview on December 18. The disarmament should have started on December 1, but up to now, nothing has been done. So naturally, I think we will not meet the time that is stated. Kaba interpreted this as a requiem from the Conakry peace plan and for the principle of dialogue. All peaceful means now seem to have been shattered. Events of the last weeks have brought the problem to a stalemate. I am therefore compelled to face reality and come to this sad and realistic conclusion that the resolution of this problem can only be achieved through other means. This prompted another meeting of the Committee of Five. It was their seventh. The committee not only reaffirmed the centrality of the Conakry Peace Plan, it emphasized the importance of adhering to the handover date. It therefore asked the Security Council to accelerate the deployment of UN military observers to enhance the implementation of the disarmament process, and urged ECOWAS countries to help upgrade ECOMOG's operational capability. This was necessary because, apart from Guinea and Nigeria, no other ECOWAS country had agreed to send troops to Sierra Leone. The committee then traveled to New York on February 5th, 1998. It first met with the United Nations Secretary General and then briefed members of the Security Council on an informal meeting. Chief Ikimi informed the Council that the junta had refused to implement the Conakry Peace Plan and had busied itself introducing new conditions for compliance. He also reported the junta's unwillingness to hand over power on April 22, emphasizing that ECOWAS was not ready to countenance any of these demands. It concluded by pleading with the Council to deploy the promised UN military observers without further delay. Although the Council issued no statement, the Committee of Five did. On February 6, it claimed inter alia that the Council had supported its actions in Sierra Leone and had promised to strengthen its support, including the creation of a trust fund. Ikimi's briefing stopped short of telling the whole truth, particularly the fact that on that very day, his country's forces were already engaged in an all-out offensive on Freetown. Being preoccupied with the resurgent crisis in the Gulf following Saddam Hussein's refusal to allow UN weapons inspectors to do their work, the Council had had very little time for the ECOWAS delegation. They had met under the areas formula. While this was going on, a new ECOMOG field commander, Major General Timothy Shelpidi, arrived in Freetown, declaring an all-out war on the junta. We are moving with full force and we are not joking. I can tell you, if we are going to take Freetown, we will take it when we want to, he declared on February 12. The Nigerians reached the center of Freetown, recaptured State House, and forced the junta to retreat and seek sanctuary in the interior ominously, without even a fight. This Nigerian assault seemed to have surprised even the Security Council, which had then ordered an immediate ceasefire on February 10. The president of the council recounted that they had never authorized anyone to use force and angrily accused the ECOWAS delegation of misleading members of the council at their briefing on February 6. Chief Ikimi had merely characterized the offensive as a skirmish when questioned by the press, but as observed by a diplomat in New York, it was obvious that while they were whitewashing in New York, they were planning to topple the junta by military means, contrary to the decisions of the Security Council. This rebuke so angered Ambassador Jonah of Sierra Leone that he spared no breath in conveying his displeasure. I do not understand the new jurisprudence that I have been hearing in the corridors, he said. Some say that the ECOWAS ministers, when they were in New York recently, deceived the Security Council. First of all, we have to remember that there was no formal meeting of the Security Council on Sierra Leone. The meeting, which was closed, was requested by the 5 foreign ministers under the areas formula. They came to find out what the UN Security Council was prepared to do. All they were told was that the Secretary General had recommended 10 military liaison officers to go to Sierra Leone. That was all the Security Council was preparing to ask for. 10 military liaison officers, just 10. If there was anyone who should have been frustrated, it was the 5 foreign ministers and not the Security Council and those who talked about being deceived by the foreign ministers, he added. He said, it is obvious, however, that the assault on Freetown did not happen suddenly. In fact, it had been delayed in order to give Kaba and Abacha time to work on members of the Security Council who were opposed to the use of force. It was obvious, too, that by the end of 1997, the patience of the two leaders had worn thin, and they were now resolved to taking the military option, whatever the cost. When they spoke about dialogue, they were merely playing for time. For Abacha, he had become obsessed about getting a big foreign policy success in order to deflect attention away from his international pariah status and get his Western tormentors off his back. For Kaba, the waiting game in Conakry had become unbearable. It was beginning to look like eternity. What is more, the Kamajors were growing restive, especially after being made battle-ready by the Nigerians and Sandline International, the mercenary firm that had supplied them with weapons. They were all now anxious to prove their worth. Of course, there had been many previous attempts at peaceful settlement, none of which had come to fruition. It is also true that there can be no promise of peace or policy of patience without limits. Though some might say that prior to the Conakry Accord, there had been no genuine offer of dialogue from both sides. All that one could really see was continuous posturing, maneuvering, and false pretenses. Hardly a genuine attempt at dialogue from either side. There was thus no hope for the durability of any previous peace plan. The battle readiness of the pro-Kaba forces did not fail to induce a militaristic posture within the Kaba camp. Earlier, he had delegated powers to the ECOWAS Committee of Five to negotiate on his behalf and to agree to any peace proposals for him and for themselves. When the committee briefed him on the outcome of the Conakry meeting, he welcomed it as evidenced in a statement he issued from the Commonwealth Summit in Edinburgh on October 24. 4 days later, he repudiated two key demands in the peace plan, namely the granting of amnesty to the coup leaders and the 6 months timetable for the transfer of power. So that then we want that therefore grant them amnesty and the 6 months when they're in the power till they hand over power. His objections were that the rebels had destroyed his private home in Freetown, likely many other citizens who had lost their homes and loved ones during the rebel war. His emotion was understandable. However, if that argument were allowed to prevail, then presumably thousands of other people, relatives of those who had been killed and those whose properties had been destroyed, could reasonably demand that they too were entitled to retributive justice. Ultimately, it would look like telling the junta not to hand over power or not to stop fighting because they could not be certain of avoiding criminal prosecution. It is also not easy to reconcile many of Kaba's utterances. For example, his rejection of amnesty for the coupists cannot be reconciled with his promise of genuine and lasting reconciliation. He first made that promise to the United Nations on October 1 and confirmed it at the London conference on Sierra Leone on October 20, just 3 days before the Conakry peace plan was signed. He even promised to set up a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, a la South Africa, again referencing South Africa's Peace and Truth Reconciliation Commission, which is something that we need in Sierra Leone anyways, for all the killings that has occurred since 2018 to date, to 2023, and to date, all the killings, we need a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. People should be brought to justice. It's going to happen one day in Sierra Leone. It's going to happen. Everyone that has committed these atrocities, killing people innocently, should pay. Public tribunals. All right. He even promised to set up a Truth and Reconciliation Commission a la South Africa. Again, on November 5, Kaba urged his countrymen to embrace the Conakry peace plan, describing it as an instrument that contains a number of positive elements for the resolution of the crisis. A week later, on November 12th, he reversed himself. He said, He was reported on ruling out power sharing with the junta, saying this was not justified by the constitution. My constitution prevents me doing a number of things, and I'm not interested in that kind of compromise, he said. He again repeated his riposte to amnesty for the coupists, saying that the cruelty witnessed in the first days of the coup, even if I had promised an amnesty for the coup makers, I would come under great pressure to punish them in an exemplary manner. Then, in an amazing volte-face, Kaba declared his willingness to work with Fodi Sanko. We all make mistakes. If he recognizes he is and promises to work for the good of the country, I cannot rule out forgiving him and considering him a compatriot, associating him with the future of this country, he said. But he said he would not work with the leader of the AFRC. Apparently, he ignored the fact that the RAF had committed atrocities which made those of the AFRC look picayune. It's spelled, Picayune. Picayune. That means the atrocities the RAF, caused in Sierra Leone is nothing compared to what the AFRC did. But Kaba was willing to work with the RAF. Why? Because SLPP is RAF, right? So he said he's willing to forgive Fodi Sanko, but not the junta. And remember what they did to the military. For you guys that have been following me whilst I'm reading this, right? What they've done to the military around that time and what they're doing today is the same thing they did back then. They are purging the military, killing Northerners, killing soldiers, of the Northern origins. That is the same thing they did back then. That was what caused the 1997, coup by Johnny Paul, because the Kamajos were just going around killing soldiers. And it's the same thing that is happening today, because these are Kamajos, these guys that we have, these are Kamajos killing soldiers. And we're seeing it right now. It's happening in Sierra Leone right now. It's a purge. It's a purge. No sooner it was restored to power in February 1998 than it was immediately struck down by selective amnesia, conveniently forgetting most of his promises and putting Fodi Sanko and many others on trial for treason. And that's Jankoba. But guys, I'm going to leave it here. Tomorrow I'm going to continue. I'm going to continue on page 107. All right? It's been a long day. Well, thank you all for joining me. I appreciate you all. We have to do this. We have to remind these guys of what they've done to Sierra Leone. And that's why I'm appealing to young folks, to read. We don't read. All of us, we're guilty of that, this generation. We don't read as much anymore. We've forgotten about our history. Everybody's just thinking about the next video. And you have people like Marabio, see, I call him Fodi Sanko. I mean, his sister was married to Fodi Sanko. And we know he was able to go get peace with Fodi Sanko because his sister was married to Fodi Sanko. So that's how he was able to. But anyways, everything we're doing, is to ensure that we remind these guys of the terrible history that Sierra Leone has had, the pain where people don't suffer. And we have to remind them so that everybody knows that eventually, people have to pay for what they've done to our country. People have to pay. It's very sad. And it should not happen. It should not happen. But again, I'll continue tomorrow. It's 8 o'clock now. For those of us in America, I know it's a little late. In Sierra Leone, of course, it's extremely late. But I'll try again tomorrow. Today, it's tough. It's been a long week, long weekend and everything. But I appreciate all of you guys for joining me, okay? Share, and we'll take it from there. So, bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye. All right. Thank you, Lamine, by the way.